Today I'll be reading out information related to Park Chan-wook's collaborator on this particular feature. He's lesser known, at least in the West, English-speaking world. Certainly, I was not wholly aware of him. Park Chan-kyung, his younger brother. This is from the Wikipedia's. Park Chan-kyung is a South Korean media artist, filmmaker, and arts critic born in 1965 in Seoul, South Korea. Park is known for his advocacy of the revival of Minjung art in the 90s through both exhibition organising and writing. With his first solo show in 1997, Park's career as a media artist working across photography, film, sculpture, and installation art took off, even as he continued to write criticism and curate shows. His multimedia works often deal with traumatic moments in Korean modern and contemporary history, e.g. the splitting of the Korean peninsula, the relevance of tradition in the modern age, and the shifting role of spiritual practices like shamanism in contemporary Korea. After graduating from Seoul National University in 1988, Park was part of several collectives engaged with the legacy of Minjung art, including the Art Criticism Research Group, Seongnam Project, and Art Space Pool. He curated exhibitions and collaborated on projects that concerned Korea's rapidly changing urban space, as well as wrote extensively for publications like Forum A, which he co-founded, on theoretical issues about contemporary Korean art. Park's artistic practice in the late 1990s continued to engage with core questions Minjung artists had raised decades prior about the relationship between politics and art. He continued to explore the possibilities of utilizing documentary photography and archival material to examine the effects of Korea's rapid modernization with works like Sindawn 2008 and Manshin 10,000 Spirits 2014. Through his curation of Media City Seoul 2014, Park attempted to expand his thinking to consider how artists across Asia utilize similar techniques and imagery to engage with trauma, leading him to continue drawing on the phrase Asian Gothic, a term he coined in 2007 in his writing. Park has exhibited extensively at home and abroad, sometimes together with his brother filmmaker Park Chan-wook under the moniker Parking Chance. Together they won the Golden Bear at the Berlin International Film Festival in 2011 for their film Night Fishing 2011. Both brothers were temporarily blacklisted by the South Korean Culture Ministry under President Park Geun-hye's administration. The end of the blacklist has allowed Park Chan-kyung to resume his major film projects. Park will also have his first solo show in the US at the National Museum of Asian Art at the Smithsonian at the end of 2023. Park still lives and works in Seoul. And just so we're all aware of the premise of this particular film, it's a crowdsourced film about life in the Korean megalopolis. They've taken samples of all this footage and placed it together into this compiled feature. It's a fascinating, moving project, and I'd like to read out some of the more fascinating details about Park. Where am I? Park Chan-kyung. Particularly, this section on major themes I think is fascinating. It's interesting. Apparently, he wants to work on a horror film in the near future. I'd love to see that, because he's only been responsible for 2 features. This one and the documentary, also from 2014, about the shaman. Manshin 10,000 Spirits. Anyway. Major themes. Park often references modern and contemporary Korean historical events in works like Citizens Forest 2016. Shin Chung-hoon argues that with works like Black Box, The Memory of Cold War Images 1997, and Sets 2000, Park is less interested in interrogating the actual events of history and more concerned with how images shape human memory of historical moments. Scholar Park So-yeon describes Park's approach to the politics of memory as that of an image archaeologist, collecting and sifting through a wide array of archival materials. Curator Hyun-jin Kim asserts that Park delves into traumatic historical moments in order to rethink Asian modernity and pursue a hauntological understanding of the extremely violent and oppressive trajectories of East Asia in the 20th century. Shin Chung-hoon traces Park's use of kitsch back to techniques used by Minjung art groups like Reality and Utterance. Park acknowledged his use of kitsch elements in video works like Sindawn in 2008. Park stated that he intentionally incorporated elements of kitsch in the work, seeking to critique urban dwellers who might initially dismiss these images as proof of their superiority over naive rural citizens. Issues of tradition began to feature more prominently in Park's work of Sindawn. Park distinguishes tradition from traditional culture, making the former challenging to accurately verbalize in and of itself. Park describes tradition as fragmented structures of power that have been long preserved with a society. His sustained interest in questions of tradition has resulted in writing by both the artist and scholars writing on his work, like curator and critic Patrick Flores, on the relationship of tradition to the sublime, colonial history in the present day. Park's insistence on the relevance of tradition to the contemporary moment led him to declare with fellow critic Lee Young-wook that the task before us is then to reawaken the tradition that has been severed and oppressed from our memories, and feel it with all our senses, for this is how the future comes into view. This longer chronology for tradition has led him to adopt the term Longu-juri tradition. In his notes for the catalogue for his exhibition at the National Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art, NMCA, from 2019 to 2020, Park described a theological shift in his artistic practice that he had in the mid-2000s while working on Sindawo in 2008. He explained that he tried to balance history and religion in the video work Sindawo, for which he felt that a Western framework for understanding Korean modernity was insufficient. After making Sindawo, Park made several feature films and short films on Korean folk religion and shamanism, including Anyang, Paradise City 2010, Manshin 10,000 Spirits 2013, and Citizens Forest 2016. His interest in religion, and more specifically Buddhism, grew after the Fukushima nuclear accident and the sinking of the MV Sewol ferry. Park clarified, however, that this turn to religious themes in his work is motivated by his interest in visual and literary culture around Buddhism rather than Buddhist doctrine itself. Belated Bosal 2019 is one example of this move in his work towards Buddhism. Park's exploration of religion in his work is also in part prompted by his observations of the effects of secularization on Korean society, prompting us to ask how they might restore a sense of community in a completely desacred society, regardless of how religious institutions claim and work now. Park first used the term Asian Gothic in 2007 in his essay on Sindawo, but only fully explained the concept in a paper he gave in 2014 at the Special Symposium of the Korean Society of Art History in 2014. Park described Asian Gothic as referring to a return of grotesque Gothic imagery in contemporary Korean culture that reflects local trauma, violence, fear, pain of Asia's modern project. He argued that Gothic culture generally emerges in post-war or post-colonial societies when tradition is reconfigured in the contemporary moment, and pointed to other examples in Southeast Asia, Japan, and China. We'll close it here. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.